This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This is Sarah, and I just want to take a moment to speak to you about this week's sponsor, Favor. Favor, Inc. is a statewide family-led nonprofit 501c3 organization that is committed to empowering families as advocates and partners in improving educational and health outcomes for our children. Favor is the Connecticut state organization of the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Favor offers a single place for families with children who have medical, mental, emotional, and behavioral health challenges to find information, assistance, and training. To find out more about Favor, please go to favor-ct.org. We are grateful for our opportunity to work with Favor as a sponsor, and now on to the rest of the episode.
This episode is brought to you by CogniView. CogniView provides cognitive assessment tools to a broad range of healthcare providers for the early detection of cognitive impairment. Early detection allows patients to address modifiable risk factors sooner, potentially changing the course of cognitive decline. It also allows healthcare providers to develop a plan with the patient and caregiver so the patient can live their best life during their journey. For more information, go to www.cognivue.com. That's www.cognivue.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Chronicles. My name is Sarah, and today I have the lovely Debbie Weiss with me. She is back on Caregiver Chronicles. Debbie is a former family caregiver for both her dad and her husband. She's a caregiver for her son. She is now a coach and the author of the book On Second Thought, Maybe I Can. And she's also the host of the podcast, Maybe I Can. Hello, Debbie, and welcome back.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. It is just, you know what? I think this is my first repeat podcast, and I'm not surprised because you and I connected just on an amazing level first time. So thank you so much for having me back again.
Thank you so much for coming back. I'm excited to have you back. You've been doing some incredible things since the last time we talked. Your life has changed significantly, and you've done some amazing things. I just want to go back and let my audience know the last time we talked, that episode aired. It was probably like April-ish of 2022 because the episode aired in May of 2022. So it was roughly a year and a half ago, give or take a few weeks.
Yep.
How has your life changed since
Oh gosh. Oh my goodness. When you just said that date, kind of took me right back there. So in June of 2022, my husband was diagnosed with a terminal blood cancer, and it kind of came out of the blue, even though he had been ill with other illnesses, but nothing terminal. And just 6 weeks prior, he had had a hospital stay for depression and anxiety. And he had come out of that a new person, the new lease on life. And the first time in years, he felt so hopeful, and our whole family felt hopeful. And then less than 6 weeks later, he gets this news. And he only lived for 6 months after the diagnosis. So he passed away December 30th, 2022. So I would say that is for sure my biggest life change since April of that year.
Yeah. And I can imagine that was a huge wrench in everything. And what an opportunity to get a new lease on life and to come out so positive and just so soon after and just have a terminal diagnosis. I can't even imagine how hard that was for you and your family. And again, I'm very sorry for your loss. I know that you've done an amazing job being a caregiver for him. and you've done an amazing job just documenting your journey. And despite that difficultness, you still have such a positive attitude and a positive outlook. How did that change?
You know, I think I got to tell you, those 6 months were probably the roughest 6 months of my life. It was really difficult for anybody who receives a terminal illness. There's stages that you go through as far as acceptance and grief and anger and all of these things. For somebody with mental illness, it takes that to a whole new level. And so physically and mentally, it was just the hardest out of the 40 years of caregiving, for sure. It was the hardest and most taxing mentally for me. And in that time, when you said what's changed since then, that's when I actually wrote my memoir. And I want to stress that because when I don't even think it was a might have been a thought in the last time we spoke in April, but it was nothing that I really truly believed I was going to do. And I wound up kind of buying in. I heard a woman on a podcast being interviewed, and she helped first time authors get their story out there. And I really liked her from listening. And I thought to myself, if I am going to ever do this, and this is prior to the diagnosis, am I ever going to do this? I need help. So let me contact this woman. And I did, and we talked, and she was launching a 12-week group program for first time authors. And that's when my husband was diagnosed. So I was thinking about it, and then my husband was diagnosed. And I said to myself, well, not there goes that, but clearly this is not the time. And I remember bringing it up to my therapist, and I was almost embarrassed that I felt so selfish. I was even asking this and saying this out loud to somebody at a time like this. Here I am thinking about writing a book. Like, who cares? She shocked me with her answer because she said, I think this is the absolute critical, perfect time for you to write this book because you need something else separate from that caregiving journey that you're about to be on, just for you. And, I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I'm not a writer. All these things. So I had that as well. I decided to do it. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made because it helped me in so many ways get through the whole journey.
Yeah. And I really love that she told you to do it anyway, to have something else to focus on, because despite we can always focus on what we can't control and worry about it, but we never take enough time to do the things that we can control sometimes, especially in those crises. And that's how you thrive, and you've really come out of this. And I follow your TikTok account too. And I watch almost every single one of your videos that pops up on my For You page. I watch, and there is some great tidbits of advice. And I remember watching an episode right around the time your book was being published, and your husband had passed, and you had the water heater break or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. And I was sitting in a Target parking lot, like watching your TikTok, like listening to your story and listening.
Was that downstairs when I was trying to clean the basement up?
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
were just like, so, and I felt like, I'm like, oh my God, like this, like I can imagine, like I know what this woman feels like, because in some aspect, not in every aspect, but in certain aspects, like, because I was in a similar situation where we had something, I forgot what it was that was broken in my house. It was probably everything, but but we had something broken in my house too, and I had my kids, and I think my husband had the flu, or we had a stomach bug or something like that go through the house recently. And it was just like, and while I wasn't dealing with grief, I was dealing with all that other stressor. And I'm like, And this woman is still going to do this book. And I'm like, and I am so proud of her. And I remember thinking, like, she was a guest on my show, and look at her, like, share her vulnerability and persevere. And so I want to say thank you for doing those and sharing those moments, because when we see other people succeed and struggle, like do both, because you don't want to see people cry every day that their life sucks. That's not helpful.
Right.
But when we see the highs and lows that other people go through, we realize that we just have so much, like, we just realize, like, hey, this is my life too. And I want to thank you for doing that and putting your book out and doing all the things that you've been doing. Do you want to talk about your TikToks? Because you did like the 60 days till 60 and all kinds of great videos.
Well, thank you. And thank you for saying that, because, when you make the videos, you think to yourself, does anybody really care? Does anybody really care that I'm in my basement crying? They should have only seen that I'm FaceTiming my brother who lives, 7 hours away. And I'm like, Michael, how do I do this? How do I make the water suck up instead of like the dry back, whatever the heck it is, blow out? Like, I am completely that. Anything mechanical, not that that's a big mechanical thing. This is so out of my wheelhouse and my comfort zone. And I sometimes lack some common sense. I've gotten better over the years. He took a look, and I was telling him that I don't even know why I'm telling you this story. I don't remember if this had happened when I made the video. I called him like several times during this whole thing. And I said, my back is killing me. I couldn't figure out how to hook this up. And I was taking the big hose and I was using it like an elephant trunk. And I was bending over because I couldn't get this on this. And he goes, can you hold the phone up to the hookup? And he's like, Deb, you have it on backwards. I was like, what? My back was broken. I'm like, oh my gosh, and at one point I was crying, and at one point I was laughing at myself, and I think what you said is so true, because I don't know about you, but I spent a lot of my life being, even though I was happy on the outside most of the time, inside I was feeling sorry for myself. Why was I given this path of, I hate to say of caregiving, because, I think we all know, those of us that are caregivers, I think we would do it again in a heartbeat. I think when that's your sole focus, that's when you lose yourself, and that's when you start to become maybe angry and resentful. And I was that way for about 30 years. And I discovered, oh, I can care for my loved one, and I can and should, first of all, be caring for myself. That's when things started to shift. So I didn't even answer your YouTube question. So, all right, back to that. So for a while, when I first started, I was very uncomfortable thinking, who's going to watch these dumb videos, as I thought to myself. But I just decided the easiest way for me, I can't think about putting makeup on and wearing the right clothes and all of that. I just gave that up, and I started making the videos in the morning when I walk my dog, my regular routine. And I really didn't give much forethought to what I was going to say. I would think about it for like a second, and then I would say whatever was on my mind, right? Well, I have an assistant who would then take those videos and post them to TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. I am not a social media person, meaning I don't spend time on the platform. So if I ever am not commenting to what you say or whatever, don't take it personally, because I'm bad at that. I didn't even I knew videos were going on TikTok, but I never actually opened the app. One day she said to me, this was right after my husband died, have you been on TikTok? And I said, no. Why? I don't go on TikTok. She said, well, one of your videos has like 19,000 views. And I was like, what? And then I started watching. And this was honestly 2 weeks after my husband died. And that particular video that I made started again with no forethought, just what was on my mind, which was it's been 8 days since my husband died. And, and then I said something like, everything feels out of control. I'm eating cookies for breakfast. I haven't exercised. Literally my whole life has been turned upside down. It was that video. And in the end, I wound up getting 3.7 million views. And I went from, I think, having 70 followers on TikTok to like 59,000. The comments, I don't remember. I don't know if it's now I have 250,000 comments or I did then. Whatever it was an obscene amount to me. And they were all so genuine. And they were how sorry they were for my loss. And then it was, we're going to walk with Debbie and we're going to get back on track. And, others sharing their, grief stories. It was literally like the world gave me a virtual hug. And it was something so unexpected. And it never happened again. After that, my videos went back to having the normal people amount of views, a couple of hundred views. But it doesn't matter because I knew I reached people and it kind of went right through the screen and reached me back. And it was truly the positive power of social media.
No, but I love it. And again, like you said, that's the positive power of social media. You can share your story even when it's a crap story, but so many people can either maybe they don't understand, but maybe they can support you and just offer kind words. Or maybe they really get it. Maybe they're going through it too. And maybe sometimes when you're going through something and you think you're the only person or nobody else quite gets it, and you hear someone else say, I'm going through this too. It's so validating and it's so comforting. Sometimes it's more comforting than just the I'm sorry for your loss. While that's a great thing to hear, the I get it. After I lost my husband, I wore pajamas for 3 weeks, or you know what I mean, or I didn't know how to do this and I tried to do it and then I just cried, or it's those relatable stories that are the real ones that they just hit home, because in those moments you think, have I lost my mind?
Exactly. Am I the only one? And like you said, I think that is the big thing. It's so validating. We do always think, nobody else can understand. And no, of course, nobody else has the same exact circumstances. But we do all go through highs and lows. They might look a little bit different, but hearing that somebody else is going through the same thing is incredibly, it's just comforting. And you realize, no, I'm normal. We're all normal. This is what life is. And some days suck and some minutes suck, right? And then 15 minutes later, everything, the sun comes out kind of thing.
And this is why we do what we do. This is why Caregiver Chronicles is what we do, and this is why you do what you do, because it's so important that we get our stories out there and we help and support others. And I just, yeah, again, I just love your videos. There's been so many times where there's been something I needed to hear that day. And even the title of your book, on second thought, maybe I can. I'm really good at second guessing myself, and third and fourth and fifth and sixth guessing myself, if that's even a thing. But I'm really good at that. Is that how that came about, or how did that title come about?
Came about because anytime either a person presented me with something, I don't even want to say a challenge. It's not, it's something small, or the thought crossed my mind, my initial answer was always, I can't do that. And then in my mind, right, I would list all the reasons. I would, make a case to myself of why, of course, I can't do that. Whether it's I'm not good at that, whether it's I don't have the time for that, but whatever. Like, we can all make a million excuses. And if you just pause for a minute, and that's where the on second thought came, like I would just say I can't in my mind, I would make the stories and then move on. But if you just pause for a minute, and why don't we ever dive into the other side, right? The flip side. Well, maybe I can. maybe I can do something that I might view as hard. Because think of all the other things I have gone through and done in my life that I thought I would never get through, that was going to be impossible, that I was afraid of, that I actually did. So if I did all those things, who's to say I can't do this? So that's where it came from, because I can't was, or I won't, or was always my favorite phrase. Oh, I don't do that. Oh, no, I'm not good at that. Nope, I'm not good at art. I'm not creative. I'm not, whatever it is for you. And so that's where the title really came from, is that my whole life it's been that knee jerk, I can't. And then, let me think about that for a minute, and those times when I did think about it, when I did say maybe I can, and really when I did face my fear, right? Because saying I can't, real answer is I'm afraid. I'm afraid I'm going to fail. I'm afraid I'm going to be embarrassed or rejected, or I'm afraid of something. And, what I've learned is that all good things happen for you when you walk through your fear, not staying in your comfort zone, which is the easiest thing to do, which is stay in your comfort zone. And I did for a very long time.
In your book, and even just that title is a reminder, and especially for family caregivers, I think that we need that reminder more than non-family caregivers, because we're so confined to in our lives, our entire lives revolve around other people, the person
Exactly.
we care for or people we care for, depending on our situation, our entire lives. So it's so easy for family caregivers to say, I can't because my son can't, or I don't know how this will go, so I'm not going to, or whatever the reason. I can't tell you how many times I have said I can't do that with Joey because I don't think he'll be able to handle it. And in reality, when we've gone and I said, you know what, we're gonna try it anyway, or we're gonna do a practice run and he does amazing. And then it comes down to, well, what's the worst case scenario? He has a meltdown.
So
That's
you
that's
leave.
that's he might have a meltdown if we stay home and do nothing anyway. Um, Sometimes there's more behaviors when we do nothing. So, you know, it's the, you know what, we're gonna do it anyway, is kind of the philosophy that we've adopted as a family. And
For
again,
you.
it's been refreshing for us, and it's been beneficial for all of our mental health. Just to say, you know what, we're gonna try it. And I went on a retreat for family caregivers a few weeks ago, and I tried, and I'm terrified of heights, and I thought I was going to vomit all over myself because heights, like, awful. But I went ziplining.
Oh, what?
I
I would be
did it.
petrified of that too. So how was it?
It was amazing. It was the coolest thing I ever did. And the zip line had challenges. So the first zip line, you go down to get the feel for it, and then you had to go by on a zip line and drop a rock in a bucket. Well, wouldn't you know, I thought my biggest accomplishment that day was going to be not vomiting in myself. I got the rock in the bucket. I was so
Good
proud.
girl.
And then
High five.
the second challenge, we had to get a hoop on a pole, and I got that one too. So I like nailed it. And some of the people in the group were not afraid. And there was one woman who was like, I could not believe her. Like, she was an amazing person. She is an amazing person. But she went upside down on the zip line. And that's a whole other level. Like, I think she showed me up by doing that.
No, she didn't, because
Because
look what you did.
I conquered a fear, you
Exactly. And
know?
and you said it was the most amazing thing, that you never would have had that experience. And look how good you feel about yourself, as you should, because I think I know I would feel the same way. Just hearing the word zip line makes me sick.
Yeah. And that's what I was like. I was like, ziplining in the morning. Cool. Like, not really. But I did it. In the picture of there's a picture of me coming down the final zip line. And at that point, I was just so excited and so happy and like so proud of myself and everyone else, because we were all cheering each other on. that I let go. My first ride down, I was like holding on to the line for dear life as if it's gonna step, knowing in my head that like realistically they go through safety checks, and these straps are like ultra thick. Like these
Yeah,
these aren't gonna just break. Um, so by the end, I'm like, woohoo, with my arms out and just smiling and just like, I don't know, it was a whole thing. But again, for family caregivers, that whole I can't is the first thing we think all the time. I can't because, the person I care for can't. Did you try it with them? Did you ask them? Would they like to do this? We're talking about taking a family trip to Boston, and we thought at one point in time we would not ever be able to do that with our son. We're nervous about the subway and the train, but we're like, you know what? We get the noise canceling headphones
Mhm.
and the harness on him so he can't take off. He has a meltdown, he has a meltdown. And then we know like he doesn't like subways, but maybe he'll be fine, and we don't know till we do it. So
Exactly. Good for you. It's
yeah,
wonderful. And like you said, now your family is having all these experiences that they wouldn't have had.
exactly. So we have to change that I can't to, you know what, why can't I? And if it's not like a physical, like
Of
physical
course.
barrier, or like a conflicting schedule agreement or something like that, you know try start saying I can more, and you do good. And especially when it's something for you, that's what you got to say I can too more. So also, I know that you kind of scrapped or put the brakes on your caregiving coaching that you were doing before. Do you want to talk a little bit about why you did that?
Hmm. So, yes, I was just going to say I didn't really scrap it, but I guess I did. And I think for me at that time, my goal, and still my goal, by the way, is to make sure that family caregivers understand the importance of self care. But what I found with the coaching was that, and understandably, people wanted to just really talk about their difficulties instead of working on what they can do to improve. And I think for me at that time, I just did not have the emotional capacity to deal with other people's, because I am empathetic and, really take that on. And, this was a form of self care. This was a form of self care when I realized this is not healthy for me at this time. So, around the same time, what I also realized is that my message was geared towards caregivers because that's who I am, but it really is a little broader than that because my message was regardless of your circumstances, and again, my circumstances mostly being about the caregiving, right, and the struggle and how difficult it can be, regardless of our circumstances, we all have the power within us to change our lives. It doesn't make a difference if whatever your constraints are, whatever you say, and you could be that person out there who said, oh yeah, but she doesn't understand what I have. She doesn't understand, and then you're telling yourself, I've got this and this and this and this. Okay, that's great, you got this and this and this. You're telling me that you can't find time to really sit down and figure out, what do I want, where do I want my life to head, and make one small change a day to move you in that direction. Anybody can. It doesn't matter. A homeless person can. So stop with the excuses. And I think that that's when I realized it's not just caregivers. How many, and honestly, I'm really, talking more to women, even though it's obviously a male or female makes no difference. How many of us do that and get lost in ourselves? And especially, I believe, as women, because we are natural caregivers, even if we aren't caring for an aging parent or a child or, sibling, whatever, even if you're just a woman, even if you don't have children, I feel like women just put themselves in the caregiving role, whether it's with your friends, whether it's with people you work with, right? And we're so giving, which is wonderful. And we should continue to be giving. There's no reason why you can't and shouldn't also give to yourself. They're not exclusive. You could and should do both. And that's when I decided to kind of broaden my message and stop the caregiving coaching and now just coach and speak about that broader message and how to change your life, how to take yourself from A to B.
Thank you. And I love it. And again, I like, again, it's just so important for family caregivers. I also want to talk really quick too about your podcast because I know that you have a podcast. Maybe I can. That's another new thing. You have so many new projects.
Started my podcast in May, and the thing that I'm not happy with is the thing I want the podcast to be is inspirational. One, some inspirational stories about other people who went from I can't to I can, because that's always inspiring to hear other people's journeys and how they did that, as well as, useful tools, tips, tricks, that kind of thing. Interviewing people, you're very good at it, Sarah, but for me, I'm having some difficulty, and I'm having some difficulty finding guests, but I think I've said yes to guests that I don't really think are the right fit for my show. So I'm kind of in a journey with that right now. But I don't know if you know this, but what I've decided to do, effective November 1st through Christmas, Monday through Friday, I'm doing what I'm calling a morning sprinkle of inspiration. And I'm just doing under 5 minutes. Most of them are like 2 minutes or less. Just a little snippet of information, kind of like my other videos, right? But just through the podcast, and they'll also be on social media to kind of just start your day off right. Because one of the things that I have found over the last couple of years that I enjoy doing, kind of when I'm eating breakfast or whatever, I have a book that is like short, something that maybe it is just inspirational quotes, and I read a few pages, and I don't know, it just kind of gets me thinking and kind of gets my day started off on a positive note. So I wanted to do that for others.
Yeah. And I love that too. And that's another thing I've been seeing on your TikToks. And I love it. And as far as podcasting goes, it takes a long time, and I will say this because we're on our 4th year with Caregiver Chronicles, which is like, and I was a terrible interviewer. When I first started doing this, I had no idea what I was doing. I was talking over guests, I was stuttering. I'm fortunate that I have a spouse with a media background who can be like, hey, you did this, don't do that. And also a lot of trial and error. The show runs different now than it did in March of 2022. I had to make changes based off of what was happening just globally in our world, joining network, all kinds of things. So as far as podcasting goes and not being where you want it to go, stick with it. And I believe it will get there. Because I know you can.
Well, thank you. Yes, I do absolutely 100% plan on sticking with it for sure. I'm just saying, just like everything else, it's a journey. And, I just heard, and I've heard this many times before, just heard another podcaster say this. Why are you comparing yourself, to somebody who's 4 years in, versus 6 months? That's not fair. Why are you doing that to yourself? And how many times do we all do that? And the guy said, go back and listen to my first 50 episodes, then see what you think. And so I agree with that. And I do really love it. So, and I do think it's such a great platform. And so many of the things that have happened to me, or I don't want to say happened to me, but happened because of me listening to a podcast and either connecting with the guest, connecting with the host, something that kind of set my mind in motion to hear what other people were doing and talking about that I had no idea. So I really feel strongly about the whole podcast platform. So I will continue.
Thank you. And I know that you'll be successful. And again, never compare yourself to anyone else, because I compare my show to shows that have been around for 8 years and 10 years. And it's like, yeah, no, I'm not at that stature, but I haven't been, or shows where the host is already a millionaire to start. You know what I mean?
Right.
We started on a cell phone in our truck. To be where we are now is huge. And to know the statistics that most podcasts fail after episode 7, we're 160 something in, like,
Amazing.
you know what I mean. And so and you are well past episode 7,
Yes.
so you just knowing that, you keep going,
Yep.
right? Do the best you
Agreed.
can, and that's it. So I want to thank you so much. I guess I'm kind of wrapping up to my last couple questions. Well, is there anything else you want to share with my audience?
I guess the last thing I would share is a quote that I'd heard a million times that now is kind of like my signature. And it's from Glinda the Good Witch from The Wizard of Oz, who said, "You've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself." And I feel that resonates so much with me because I never knew I had the power. I never knew I had the power within me to do whatever I wanted. Now, like you said earlier, it doesn't mean I'm going to go be an Olympic gymnast at this stage, or my body, or any of those things. I'm not talking about something like that. But, you know, I have the power to change my life, to move my life in the direction that I want. And if I don't like it, then I make another decision, and, you just keep at it. But it's not coming from some outside source that is causing my life to be this way. I make that decision.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. My favorite question to ask my guests, and I don't remember if I asked you this last time you came on, what is your favorite form of self-care?
Mm, boy, the first thing that came into my mind, which I hate to use this because people always think of like a spa as the thing of self-care. So I'm thinking of this wonderful spa that my cousin and I found, that is, very pricey. So it's not something that we can go to a lot. But just actually having it on my calendar, which I do for the end of February, that alone is self-care. But as I'm talking, I'm thinking, you know what? My newer form is learning to say no. Because I had a hard time saying no. And I would overcommit, I would volunteer, I was creating a life that was out of control because I wanted to please people. And learning to say no, it's an incredible feeling of freedom and control. And that's self-care. When no, no, whether people want you, whether you feel like, oh, I have to. That's how many of us say that, right? Oh, I have to go. They'll be so mad. Oh, I have to do this. I'm obligated. No, you're really not. You're just telling yourself that.
I really like that. I think that that's so important, and I believe that that is a new answer for us. The no, the setting a boundary. So, and again, in the spa day is totally fine self-care. I'm never gonna knock it. If you have the means to do it, to go to a fancy spa for a weekend or whatever, or by all means, do it. If you don't, and you got to do a foot soak in your living room because that's what you can access, that's fine too. And if neither of those is your thing, and you just need to tell people, hey, I can't show up for you at this time because, as long as you do it before you commit to it,
Of course.
don't back out of a commitment. But unless it's an emergency, that's different. But as long as you're like, hey, you know what, I can't attend your son's friend's cousin's sister's birthday party or whatever,
Yeah,
or you know what, I'm
exactly.
I'm not going to make potatoes because I don't like making potatoes, or whatever the whatever the
Exactly.
commitment is, whatever the self-care commitment is. And it can be sometimes something as simple as just even saying no, but offering to do something different instead. I don't want to go to the club, it's overwhelming. let's go shopping instead or whatever. Or I
Yep.
don't want to go shopping, let's go to the beach. That's fine too. So I love it. I absolutely love your message. I'm so grateful for you and what you're doing. Like I said, you inspire me. You have since before and you continue to. So even if you get 2 views on your TikTok, one of them is probably me.
Yeah.
And so you never know, but you never know who you reach. And I really encourage my audience to follow you and see everything that you do. Can you let them know where to find you?
Sure. Well, thank you again. And I think your words are too kind, honestly. So my website is Debbie R. Weiss. The R is important. Otherwise, you wind up on a realtor. And on TikTok, it's also Debbie R. Weiss. And on Instagram, it's Debbie.R.Weiss. So keep the R in there because I don't know if I told you this. There's another author named Debbie Weiss. She lives in California and she wrote a book. She's a widow as well. So you
Ah,
just never know. But anyway, so the R. Who's the R?
well, thank you so much. Again, thank you so much for coming on. And that will wrap up this week's episode of Caregiver Chronicles. If you like what you heard and you want to support our show, you can do so by using the link in our show notes to buy me a coffee. Also, you can really, the best way to support our show is to share us with a friend, give us a thumbs up, a like, a review. All that means so much to us. And again, sharing us with a friend because we all know somebody who needs to hear, maybe I can. So share this with them. And I will see you next week.